Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the final part of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy by James Gunn. So, if you haven't seen it, we are going to be going into spoiler territory here. So, go check it out. It's on Disney Plus right now, and then come back and see what we had to say about it. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and jump right in, Cheryl. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy has never been my favorite of the Marvel franchises. I
Really?
thought the first, yes, actually, I was not a fan of the first movie. I thought it was okay. The second movie, which is the one that most people don't like, I actually liked a little bit more, and that's only because of Nebula. Because I liked the characterization of Nebula in the second movie. And the first movie, I hated I liked some of it, but I hated the fact that it ends with like this whole dance off thing, and Ronan's supposed to be like this big, evil guy, and he's just sitting there watching Star Lord gyrate, and it's just so dumb to me. And then it's it's literally the power of friendship at the end, where they all hold hands, and that's how they win. And I just, oh my god, I hate that so much. But I can concede that the way I feel about the movie is not necessarily how everyone else does, and it is considered to be. And I know a lot of people love that first movie, and that is perfectly fine.
I mean, the thing I like about Guardians of the Galaxy is that it's quirky and it's fun. And I think that because of how quirky and silly it is, it allows us to not take it seriously. And because
Mm-hmm.
we have permission to not take it seriously, I feel like it makes it so that I don't dissect it as much. And
Mm-hmm.
because it's so fun, I feel like I'm able to just enjoy it without like getting upset. Not like Ant Man, the last the Quantum Leap one, where like that one was
Mania.
because I would also categorize that series of Marvel movies as fun and silly and easy to just like let go of taking it so seriously. But because it was
Yeah.
so bad, I couldn't even like enjoy it. Like none of it was fun. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah. Hey guys.
But yes, no, I feel you. But that all being said, now that that's out there, the reason I said that is because I want people to understand where I'm coming from when I say this. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is probably in my top 5 Marvel movies out of all the Marvel movies that have released thus far. I think the movie is phenomenal, for a multitude of reasons that we can get into later. But in general, this movie is kind of just, I guess it was kind of something that is like, more towards my sensibilities with how the movie is structured, because this third movie, even though it has similarities with the first two, it feels like they took the guardrails off. Like, before, they had the safety rails in place. Those safety rails are Disney, and then there was this whole thing with James Gunn and him getting fired, and then the franchise was in like limbo. But then they got James Gunn back right before, and now DC Warner Brothers is taking James Gunn. But it felt like this movie, they basically said, Disney basically said, you know what, James Gunn, we're sorry. You can do whatever you want with this movie. And that is why there's a couple of firsts in this movie, and a couple of things that you don't normally see in regular Marvel movies that happen in this movie. And because of that, to me, that's what makes this movie stand out among all the rest.
So to be honest, I I don't really know how to feel. I didn't think it was bad. Like usually,
Mm-hmm.
for Marvel movies, it's usually like oh, it's not bad for a Marvel movie, and I feel
Right.
like that's kind of how I felt a little bit. But only because like there's just so much Marvel that I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember everything, and so when I you know started watching it, I couldn't remember like some things that they were talking about. I couldn't remember some people because it'd been so long since like the last time.
It's
Um,
basically a sequel to Infinity War,
yeah, which was quite a
or
while
slash
ago.
Endgame, slash Endgame. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a while ago. So it
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of hard for me to like pick up back where we were before. And I think that's just one of the problems that is with Marvel, is that you kind of need to have seen some stuff to understand everything that's happening. One of the things that I was like asking at the beginning was like, I thought Gamora died, so
Yeah,
how
and
come
she
they're,
did.
yeah, and then they were talking about how like she's from like a different like timeline or something like that, and I don't remember that at all.
Yeah,
So
so yeah, and that was like one of those things where the characters themselves were confused on it um because a lot of them because all of them were snapped away except for Rocket, right? So they just know that Gamora died, and when they came back, Gamora was there at the final battle, but she doesn't know who Star Lord is. So that's why they're all going around. I mean, Rocket and Nebula were the only ones that survived, but that's why they're going around and saying, "Oh, she," and then some, and a little bit of denial. They're like, "Oh, she just doesn't remember what happened." When the reality is that their Gamora actually did die, and this Gamora came through with the 2014 Thanos when Thanos followed everybody through the time quantum portal, and that's the Thanos that they were fighting. But anyway, the point is that in Endgame they were fighting a Thanos from 2014, and this Gamora is from that timeline from 2014 that came over with Thanos and that Nebula, which that Nebula did die from 2014. So yeah, and that can be kind of confusing if you don't remember and stuff like that. So I get you there. But yeah, but like the movie starts off in a fashion that's very unlike most Marvel movies. It starts off on a downer. It starts off playing Creep and having Rocket singing Creep while walking around, and everyone's kind of like, people are kind of whatever, but people are kind of sad. Star Lord is drinking, and he passes out, and when Nebula comes and carries him, Drax looks at him and just like, it happened again. And then the opening title screen where you show all of our heroes walking together is Nebula carrying Star Lord passed out from like drinking himself into depression, and like while Creep is ending its song. Like it's an amazing opening, but it is a downer opening, and that's like one of the first things where I'm just kind of like, not something you normally see for a Marvel movie, especially one that's part of a franchise that's traditionally meant to be more fun.
yeah, yeah, I think I agree. I feel like the beginning was really attention grabbing. It did remind me like, okay, and it felt right because the last thing we remember about the Guardians, unless you watch Thor, um, was that like
Forgot they were in Thor.
um, but let's forget that ever happened anyway, because it really doesn't matter. It doesn't really play a part in this.
Yeah.
But the last thing I remember is that Gamora died, and Star Lord's really upset about it. So that the way this began like made a lot of sense to me. The only thing that confused me, like I said, was like I thought she was dead, and that's why the whole reason why he's so depressed and everything. And like I feel like they kind of explain it, but then not like to the extent that would really help me remember and understand. But I guess that's also kind of just my fault for not remembering. So,
Right.
but also, can you blame me? So, like, because it was a long time ago when Endgame came
When
out.
Endgame happened,
Yeah.
yeah, that was literally before the pandemic. But I mean, moving on from that though, like the movie kind of starts off, kind of hitting the ground running, right? Because immediately we have Adam Warlock come flying in and attacking everybody, and people are getting messed up, and Rocket gets hurt, and that becomes the crux of what this movie ends up being about. Is that they try to save Rocket's life, but they can't save it because he has a kill switch on his heart, and that leads them to try to have to ask the questions. Well, where did Rocket come from? Who did this to him? How can we save him? And the structure of the movie then goes between the main timeline of trying to save Rocket and a past timeline, which is Rocket's origin story. And it's very well done from the standpoint of us getting to know Rocket even better. Because for me, Rocket is like one of my three favorite characters. Like in this movie, Rocket, Nebula and Star Lord are the characters that I love how they are in the movie. And that's not to take away. I think everybody like brings something to the team, but those characters just really stand out to me personally. And so, and I remember I had two feelings when I originally saw this movie. Where one, I was like, man, it's really cool that we get to finally see Rocket's backstory. But on the other hand, I'm like, wow, is Rocket gonna spend this entire movie like on a operating table and not do anything with the main cast of characters? And that was going to upset me if that was the case. And it is for most of the movie he is not with the main cast, but by the time he does come back, they do make it worth it, and I think that that is one of the best parts about the movie.
Yeah, I think like I felt like it it felt more of an ensemble piece this time around than before, whereas like Peter was the main character, and I definitely felt like it was more even. He even was kind of more in the background.
Hmm.
And a lot of the other characters had the opportunity to really step forward in this
Yeah.
movie, and I think that I enjoyed that because I just liked being able to see the other characters, and it just didn't feel like it was about Peter. Like I'm done, with it being about other people and so it was kind of a breath of fresh air for it to be about Rocket, and it was like
Hmm.
cool. It's an origin story for Rocket, and it's about him, and the other cool thing is that like he's not even really in it in that
Hmm.
time period, because like we do
Yeah.
get to see Rocket, but it's like Rocket's history. And so we really see a lot more of Nebula working together with Mantis and Drax.
Hmm.
And even Groot is, I mean, Groot can only do so much, but they got to showcase everybody's strengths, because it's like, everyone had a chance to play a part in it and like show off what they're good at. And whereas before, I feel like they didn't really have the chance to show what they can do. Like what's
Yeah.
so great about the Guardians of the Galaxy. And now in
Right.
this movie we get to see that.
We get to absolutely see their team dynamic. Yeah, and I think it's not only on display for like their skills, but also how they interact. Like this, Playnet kind of mentioned it in the chat just now, but this was a movie that really showcases how they interact as a team and as a family. Like there is a lot of yelling at each other in this movie, and it's not all like played for laughs. Like there is yelling in this movie that's played for laughs, and there's yelling in this movie that is meant to hurt. It is meant to hurt people because people are upset. And like the one scene where Nebula yells at Drax for being an idiot, and then her and Mantis starts getting into a fight, like that scene right there, I love that scene. For one, because I also would get frustrated with Drax, and I thought it was kind of ridiculous that people wouldn't get frustrated with him because he actively causes problems. So her reacting to Drax in that way felt like, oh, okay. So they do understand that he is a problem and he is a liability. She calls him a liability, but then at the same time, when Mantis defends him, you can understand why she defends him, and then the movie doesn't leave Drax off there just being like an idiot that causes problems. It actually does give him a strength that they would not have had he not been with the group, and that is his connection with these kids that they have to save at the end of the movie. So the movie finds balance in showcasing why you need each of these people to be a part of this team and what they bring in the team dynamic, and why that if any one of them is not there, the mission doesn't succeed, even though sometimes there are problems just because of the fact that they're there. But that's one of like that's the other strength of this movie.
Yeah. So I was gonna say the other thing that made me kind of excited to see this is because when I was watching the opening, that's when you kind of see like, oh, who's gonna be in the movie, and like I
Mm-hmm.
started seeing all these names pop up, like Nathan
Nathan
Fillion. And I'm
Fillion.
like, whoa, okay, so usually when Nathan Fillion is in something, it's because he was asked to be in it, and he's like, oh, hell yeah, because he's the kind of person I feel like chooses projects that would be fun to do, especially if he's just going to be playing like a smaller part.
Yeah.
So, and that's the kind of thing, like, when you see stuff like that happen where big names play small characters, it's because there's a reason. Like, they want to be part of the project because the project is a good project. And that's, I think that really shows at the beginning of the movie. And just like, I forget who else was in it, but there were a bunch of people who were in it.
Well, what was that? Half of those people that you're thinking of are all the people from the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, because they're all like James Gunn's, like one is James Gunn's wife and like James Gunn's friends. But yes, like a lot of the cast members that you see in this movie, we saw in Peacemaker and the Suicide Squad movie. Even the main villain was the guy that was leading the team on Peacemaker, the guy who plays the High Evolutionary. So yeah, there's a lot of characters that are cameoed in this film. And when I originally saw this film, I was like, wait a second, what is Harcourt doing here? I don't understand. And my brain didn't make the connection that I'm watching a Marvel movie, not a DC movie, because of the fact that I just recognized the character and was just like, that's Harcourt. Why is she here? So yeah, no, there's a lot of cool like cameos in this movie. Nathan Fillion, like you said, was one of the top ones too, and it just shows that there's like just a love of this, like either the team that's making the film or just like the franchise itself. And yeah, it's really cool to see those characters. And to mention the High Evolutionary as a villain, so this is a character who is definitely very villainous and very evil, and it's all based off of him being a scientist. And I think that the way that they portrayed him, I like the actor and what he did portraying him. But also just like the idea that he's making these planets because he wants to like try to create a perfect race and or just make a perfect system and everything else like that. We meet these characters in Rocket's past who are all these animals that have been operated on, and they like have like, and that's another thing. I love those animals. We love those characters. The moment we meet them, we know exactly what's going to happen to them. But they're also kind of horrifying, like to look at. Like
Yes.
the
Especially
big giant
the rabbit.
the rabbit, yeah, the rabbit in
That was
particular. The
scary.
walrus also is like, So these are some creepy looking animals. But we learn to love them because this movie does such a good job of characterizing these CGI characters, including Rocket himself, and we really bond with them and we care about them. And the High Evolutionary, he has this moment with Rocket where he doesn't understand why the animals that he's evolving are like coming out with and being aggressive, and Rocket solves the problem for it, and it messes the High Evolutionary up. It like confuses him. He doesn't understand how something that he created could have an idea that he did not think of, and that leads to the crux of his motivations for wanting to go after Rocket. He is the one that sent Adam Warlock to or sent that race and people that control Adam Warlock to go and get Rocket, because he wants Rocket's brain, because his whole thing is that even if he can create the perfect society, it does not matter if they cannot have a thought that he did not implant in them. So the fact that Rocket was able to have a thought that he was not able to figure out makes that brain worthy of study, and therefore it makes it worth any risk that could happen along the way.
So the other thing about this movie is it made me cry so much. There are like multiple moments in the movie that were so emotional. That was really hard to like sit through and like not cry. And I think like that's one thing, like there are movies out there that are like fun like this, that give you moments that really make you emotional, but like multiple freaking times, like it just, because like, and you can like see it like on Peter, like he can't lose Rocket because he already lost Gamora, and he's like, I can't. And the thing is, like, I feel like they're all working so hard to keep the family together, but then at the end they're like, you know, I think we should.
Yeah.
I can't talk about it. I'm gonna cry.
Oh my god! See, no, and that's. But you're right. Like when they think that Rocket dies and Peter is screaming, like, you know, that is a big moment. There's another moment when Rocket's friends all get killed after the High Evolutionary comes and kills Lila, and then Next thing he knows, like Thor and Teef are also dead when people come in and he tries to protect himself and he turns around and they're just dead. But that initial moment when Lila dies, that is a moment that like doesn't happen in most Marvel movies. She dies and Rocket just looks at her and screams. The music is playing and he is just screaming. There's no laughs, there's no joke. He is just screaming and they want you to feel it. They want you to feel his pain. And then the High Evolutionary mocks him and then and then that's when like Rocket attacks him and bloodies his face up and everything else like that. But like the thing that makes this movie also feel like not a traditional Marvel movie is its willingness to let dramatic moments play out without undercutting them with the joke, without making you feel like I need to laugh here. It's like, no, the movie wants you to hurt and it's gonna let you hurt. And that's another reason why this movie is just like leagues abound over most Marvel movies, regardless of how people feel individually about their list. Like this is just one of those things that this movie does better than other movies.
Yeah, and even standalone without just like without the whole Gamora thing, I really feel like it stands alone very well. And that's something I think that a lot of the other Marvel movies lack, is that they're just like really insistent on tying them together, but this one doesn't.
Yeah.
It just leads in with the precursor of having some knowledge of previous movies, but I just I just really felt like they really used the idea of family and keeping the family together, and like I was saying earlier, they end it with having the family split apart and everyone's kind of going off on their own, doing different things. So some are staying together, but others are splitting off to figure out other things, which also made me really sad. But I'm interested to see in what's in store for them next, because it does sound like their story is not finished. There's going to be some kind of continuation.
Maybe in some kind of way. We know that Star Lord's definitely coming back. So, in some ways, I hope that their story is kind of just concluded, because I think that the ending is just really sweet. Like Star Lord's ending feels earned, and same thing with Rockets. Like Star Lord was someone that was taken away from his home at a young age, and he never really got to contend with that. He never really went back home and connected with his family. So him going back home to try to figure out who he is and connect with his family and not be so hung up on like a woman is kind of cool. I really like that for his story, where he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go and learn to swim. I'm gonna stop leaping from lily pad to lily pad. And then Rocket becoming the leader of the Guardians, and think like that when Lila said to him, it was like, it was your story all along. Like, man, it's just like all these really good moments. So, and this movie has a couple of other things. Like, we have the first F bomb that's been in a Marvel movie, and it's one that doesn't feel forced. It felt like it worked. And that's another thing where we haven't heard a F bomb in a Marvel movie before. So, hey, James Gunn's like, hey, I'm going to do it
It's
in
allowed.
my movie.
You get one.
Yeah, it's allowed. You get one. And he used it well. Then we had the High Evolutionary literally say, I'm going to raise it all and start again. And he destroys an entire planet. He destroys an entire planet of living organisms, and we get to see that happen. We have Gamora run out the ship, and she is watching as people get blown the F up in front of her, and he literally destroys an entire planet. And this is also a movie where our hero, Star Lord, he tackles somebody out of a window, and after the person thinks that Star-Lord's gonna let him live, and he takes him and he kills this guy, and he enjoys killing him. And this is something that you don't normally see a hero in a Marvel movie do. But this hero of Star-Lord does not care. He wants this guy dead because of what was done to his friend. And like, there's a chance he could have taken that thing off his head and had the guy live, but no, he wanted to make sure that guy suffered and that guy died, and that was the hero of our film. So there's a lot of different things in this movie that you don't normally see from Marvel movies, and those elements appease to my sensibilities. They're what I'm looking for in any type of movie. They're things that are going to get me to care. They're things that are going to make me intrigued or interested, and for that reason, that's why this movie works so well for me. That's why it's one of my favorite Marvel movies, and it's definitely the best Guardians movie. But I think it is one of my favorite Marvel movies, right up there with Winter Soldier and Infinity War. It's really that good.
Yeah, and I think like part of the reason why is because they do things that aren't normally done and for Marvel
Hmm.
and that are just kind of not expected generally in most movies. Like it's not cookie cutter anymore. Like we're kind of deviating away from, and like it's not like dramatically off of the cookie cutter, but it's off enough for it to be noticeably different from what we normally see.
Hmm.
Like another thing that I kind of felt confused about was like what they were doing with Gamora and developing this new Gamora in terms of her relationship with the rest of the family.
Group. Yeah.
And I thought that she was gonna be seeing how close they are and how important they are to each other, and that make her want to rejoin the group. But no, it
Nope.
didn't. So
It's so good.
so if
It's
it was
so good.
regular Marvel,
Yeah.
she would have rejoined the
She
group, but
rejoined
she
the group and they
didn't.
would have been happily ever after. She would have re-fell in love with Star Lord all over again, and they
Yeah.
would have rode off into the sun. Not in this movie. Nah, they go their separate ways. They have that moment where it's just like, I bet we were fun. We were, and now that's it. I'll see you around, or not.
Yeah.
She had her own family.
Maybe the next movie.
Yeah, it's like it's yeah, like you said, it feels so organic. It's crazy. Yeah, she has her own family with the Ravagers now. She has found her own way. This is not the same Gamora,
Yeah.
and that's why something different happens. And it's really interesting because Flash, the television show, did something similar where Flash Barry Allen um, saves saves Iris before she like is in love with him, and then after saving her, she's falls in love with him. But then he has to go back in time because basically Central City gets destroyed, and when he goes back in time, he tries to go and talk to Iris because he knows that she loves him, and so he tries to get that relationship going again, and she's like, "What are you doing? Get off of me! What's wrong with you?" And it's one of those examples of just like under the right circumstances in the right situation, two people absolutely can fall in love with each other, but without that stimulus, without that event, it's just as likely to not happen. And that's the case in this movie with Star Lord. It's like, yeah, the reason Gamora fell in love with you is because of the things you guys went through together. That's not what this Gamora went through, and therefore,
Yeah.
since it's not what she went through, the stimuli is not correct, and therefore, it's not going to happen.
I do have one pickle with that though, because
Hmm.
if you recall the one scene where one of the Ravagers was killed by Adam Warlock
Yeah.
during the interrogation, and then his mom picks up the intercom and starts
Then
talking to
Gamora
Gamora,
calls.
but she
Yeah.
doesn't. But Gamora doesn't realize like, oh, that's not one of my people, and then she
That's
just goes
that's how
along with it.
people sounds. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
so I was like, so she I
That's
guess she's
true.
not close to her people then if she doesn't know who they are, and so that's part of the reason why I thought like, oh, they're gonna do that thing where
Hmm.
she's gonna be like, oh, they're really close, and I want to be part of that,
Yeah.
but no, I think that's just the one little detail I
Well,
was like, oh,
you are right because this woman also doesn't talk like a Ravager. Even if she doesn't know what everybody's voice sounds like, person doesn't talk like a Ravager.
yeah,
So
she's like high end British woman.
yeah, I remember thinking that same thing. But at the same time, I thought at the end, I think the reason the end still worked with me for Gamora was because when she goes back, it's kind of this idea that she's going to like make her own family, even if she's not close with them yet. Because even Quill says, "You're not a Ravager, I am." Because he like grew up with them. So he's like, "Who are you? You just met these people." But I think that it shows that Gamora, after what she's experienced with the Guardians, she kind of wants that for herself. And so rather than get it with the Guardians, she goes and tries to get it from the people that she's spent more time with. Because the Guardians she might have spent like a week or a weekend with, but these other Ravagers she might have spent the last couple of months to a year with. So however long. So like I see her kind of seeing what she experienced with them and wanting to create that with these other people. So, but that absolutely is a good point. One other thing I want to bring up, Playmat mentioned it in the chat, and I didn't even realize it. I remember I saw it and I didn't think about it, but when Rocket makes the card key that allows him to escape in the past. In the present, he has it, and that means he always carries it with him. So he actually never got over that trauma of what happened, which is why he still has it. And I think that that is another nice little element that's a part of his character. And then, obviously, like he had this whole thing where I'm not a raccoon, I'm not a raccoon, and then when he saves those other creatures that look like him and he sees that they are in fact raccoons, he has this moment of realization and then acceptance when he gets into a final fight with the High Evolutionary and he says, "My name's Rocket, Rocket Raccoon," and then shoots him. And that's great because from the comics we know him as Rocket Raccoon. And that moment felt like the equivalent of the Avengers Assemble moment from Endgame, where we have been waiting to hear them say Avengers Assemble for all these movies, and then they finally say it at Endgame, and it's worth it. It feels like a moment that is earned. That's what it felt like here, where he had been called Rocket for 3 whole movies, and now at the end of the third one, he finally is like, you know what, I'm Rocket Raccoon. That's who I am, and it was like a wonderful punctuation on it. Like, there's just so much that this movie does well, and that's another thing I want to mention.
Yeah, and the I think the last thing I have to say is just that how I appreciate that even though like these characters have been through things over the last like hundreds of Marvel movies and content and stuff. And the one thing we didn't lose was the characters. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they were always still within the range of what their characters were and should be. And I feel like I don't know, I just really appreciate the consistency that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I was watching a movie that was different from the rest of them, in the sense that like these are just different people, like these are just the same people playing different characters,
Right.
which I do
Yeah.
feel like kind of can happen sometimes with like the different series of Marvel movies for of individual hero movies. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. These people know their characters and they were very consistent. Um, the last thing I want to that I'll kind of bring up is that the action in the movie is still really good. The music is still very much a part of this movie. I like the music. I love the ending scene where they all are dancing together. We didn't talk about Kraglin or Cosmo, but I love their little mini like sea arc that is happening in the movie of her Kraglin calling her a bad dog, and then she saves him, and then now she's a good dog. That was a really good moment too. There's so many things that I could talk about with this movie. There's the hall fight scene, like Marvel brought back their hall fight scenes from the olden days of Netflix Marvel, with the Guardians and with the appearance of One Take, and it's very cool, and the music is great, and it's just like everything. The line from the Higher Evolutionary where he says there is no God, that's why I stepped in. Like, there's just so many good parts to this movie that we can't really all talk about in this one segment. But at the end of the day, I will say that this movie for me is a total package when it has character, it has action, and it has emotional moments that'll get to you and make you cry. And when I walked away from this movie, I called this movie the feel good movie of the year, because at the end of the day, even though the movie hurts you, it also feels good because these characters are all still alive. These characters love each other, and they all get endings that you feel are earned and nothing that feels forced or unnecessary. And because of that, when I walked out of that movie, I felt good. It's a movie about family and friends, and that's what they are. And
yeah.
even if they're not together, they're still family and friends.
Yeah, and Playmat mentioned in the chat that the characters aren't reductive, like unlike Thor. So, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. It was just very
Mm.
consistent. Like they're not changing from movie to movie, and like me, like the style of the movie is different from the other ones, but the characters are still within the realm of reasonable range of what they would be like for their characters. So, or maybe
Yeah,
it's just that it's like it's progressed into this movie in a good way. So that's the
I
reason
think
why.
I think the other reason is because, like you said about the trauma, they don't use trauma for comedy, which is what they did with Thor.
Hmm.
Thor had a very interesting idea for trauma where he lost his brother, he lost his mother, he lost his father, he lost his world, like he lost everything. What's he gonna do with
Yeah.
that? And they could have played with that as a character beat, a character moment. He even had the trauma of I didn't kill Thanos and that's why half the universe is gone. But rather than them do something interesting, they played it for laughs.
Hmm.
But in Guardians, don't get us wrong, everybody. It is funny. We are talking about like the trauma and the
Hmm.
sadness. It is still funny. It is absolutely
Super
funny. You will
funny.
laugh. Yes,
Yeah.
you will laugh watching this movie. But the difference is that those laughs don't come at the expense of character and and like sad moments or traumatic moments. They let though they you get to feel both in this movie. You get to feel the highs and the lows, and sometimes they might intermix, but never at the expense of each other. And that is why it
Yes.
is like one of the best movies out there from Marvel, and because it is one of the more balanced films that takes their characters seriously, but allows itself to still have fun with them.
Yeah. It's funny when it's supposed to be funny, and it's sad when it's supposed to be sad.
Yeah.
And
Boom.
neither thing interrupts the other. So, and they're not intertwined. And I
Exactly.
think
Oh,
that's like, yeah.
this is one of those examples of us talking about it. Usually, I talk about a movie, and while we're talking about it, if I don't like it, I start to hate it. This is one of those examples where I talk about a movie, and I already liked it, and now talking about it, I love it even more. This movie is amazing. So, like, it's I don't. We'll see how we feel at the end of the year, but this movie is definitely in my top three for me personally out of movies I've seen this year. So, but that's everything that I had to say. We got long on this segment, but I think it's worth it for the movie that we had to talk about. Is there anything else that you want to say before we get out of here?
Nope, that's all for me.
So yeah, guys, that's what we thought about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We loved it here, but what did you guys think about it? Did you love it? Did you feel like it was a good ending for the Guardians as a whole? Would you like to see some of these characters return in a future movie? Is the High Evolutionary your favorite villain out of all Marvel villains? Whatever you thought about this and more, comment below. Let us know. And we're down there. If you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
I am Groot.